According to church records that were never meant for public release, the case began before the child ever took his first breath. The attending nurse would later refuse to speak about that night again. Not even years later. Not even when asked under formal review. She only wrote one statement. The baby was already looking at us before he opened his eyes. The child was born on a cold night in late November in a small provincial hospital that had seen its share of difficult births. The mother, Samina Khalid, had no prior complications. Her pregnancy had been stable, monitored, and uneventful. Until the final month, neighbors reported hearing her talking late at night. Not unusual, at first.
But the tone changed.
It became strained, urgent, as if she was answering someone they could not hear. Her husband, Tariq, dismissed it as stress. First-time parents often carried quiet fears into the late hours. But then Samina began describing dreams. Not ordinary dreams. She claimed she was standing in a dark room with no walls, holding her stomach, unable to move. She said something stood behind her, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel its breath. When she tried to turn, she would wake up, always at exactly 3:17 a.m. Medical professionals attributed it to anxiety and sleep disturbance. Nothing more. But the final incident before the birth was documented by 3 separate witnesses. One evening, Samina collapsed in her home. When her husband reached her, she was conscious, but unresponsive. Her eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling, and she was whispering, not in panic, not in pain, but in a low, steady voice, repeating the same phrase, over and over. Her husband later admitted that the words were not in any language he recognized. By the time she was admitted to the hospital, her condition appeared stable again. Blood pressure normal. Heart rate steady. No sign of neurological distress. The doctors proceeded with standard observation. Labor began 12 hours later. At 2:52 a.m., the contractions intensified. Nurses described the room as tense, but manageable. The lights flickered once during the early stages, but no one considered it unusual. Hospitals often have electrical inconsistencies. But then at 3:16 a.m., something changed. The fetal heart monitor began producing irregular patterns. Not weakening, not strengthening, just irregular. The rhythm didn't match known stress responses. It was described as erratic, but controlled. One nurse adjusted the machine. Another checked the sensors. Everything appeared properly connected. And then, for exactly 3 seconds, the monitor flatlined. No heartbeat. No signal. Complete silence. Before anyone could react, it returned. Strong. Steady. As if nothing had happened. At 3:17 a.m., the child was born. No complications. No visible abnormalities. But the delivery room did not react with relief. It fell completely silent. Because the baby did not cry. Newborns cry instinctively. It is a reflex. A biological signal of life. But this child didn't. He lay still for a moment in the nurse's hands. Eyes closed. Breathing but quiet. Then slowly his eyes opened. The nurse holding him later described it in her written report. He did not look confused. He did not react to light or sound. His eyes focused immediately, as if he already knew where to look. He was staring directly at her. Not past her. At her. And then, without any change in expression, the baby smiled. Not a reflex. Not random muscle movement. A clear, deliberate smile. Only then did he begin to cry. The sound was sharp.
Loud.
But wrong. Several staff members noted that the pitch seemed uneven. Like 2 tones overlapping each other. The moment passed quickly. Procedures resumed. The child was cleaned, examined, and declared physically healthy. No deformities. No signs of trauma. Perfect vitals. The official report listed the birth as normal. But the staff did not forget. And over the following weeks, things became harder to ignore. The parents named him Ayan. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Feeding schedules, sleep patterns, routine checkups. But small details began to stand out. At 2 weeks old, Ayan would remain awake for unusually long periods. Not crying. Not restless. just watching. His gaze followed movement with unnatural precision. Even in dim light, even from across the room. His mother began covering his crib with a thin cloth at night, saying she felt uncomfortable being watched. At 1 month old, he began making sounds. Not babbling, not cooing. Structured sounds. Short sequences. Repeated patterns. His father tried to record them once, thinking it might be an early speech development anomaly. But when he played the recording back, the sounds were gone. Only static. The pediatrician dismissed the concerns. Some infants develop irregular vocal habits. It was nothing to worry about. But then came the incident that changed everything. At exactly 6 weeks old, Ayan developed a fever. Nothing severe. Mild elevation. Common in infants. But during the night, his mother woke to a strange noise coming from the crib. Not crying. Not movement. A low, continuous humming. She turned on the light. Ayan was sitting upright. At 6 weeks old. Unsupported. Perfectly balanced. His eyes were open, fixed on the corner of the ceiling. And the sound was coming from him. She called his name. No response. She moved closer, her hands shaking. The humming stopped instantly. Ayan turned his head slowly and looked directly at her. And then he spoke. Not a word, not a sound, but a clear, deliberate whisper. One sentence. His mother later refused to repeat it, even under questioning. She only said this. It was not something a child could know. The fever disappeared by morning. Doctors found no explanation for the event. No neurological irregularities. No signs of infection. The case might have ended there, dismissed as stress, hallucination, or maternal anxiety. But it didn't. Because 2 days later, the neighbors began hearing voices again. Only this time, they were not coming from the mother. They were coming from the child's room. At first, it sounded like a television left on at low volume. Muffled voices. Indistinct. But the family did not own a television in that room. And the voices did not stop. Night after night, between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., the sounds returned. Multiple voices. Speaking over each other. Sometimes whispering. Sometimes laughing. Always low. Always contained within the room. The father eventually decided to investigate. One night, just before 3 a.m., he stood outside the door. He listened. Silence. He opened it slowly. The room was dark. Still. Ayan lay in his crib. Eyes closed. No sound. He stepped inside. And that's when he heard it. Not from the room. Not from outside. But from behind him. A voice.
Close.
Right next to his ear. Whispering something he could not understand. He turned immediately. No one was there. But when he looked back at the crib, Ayan was awake. Watching him. And smiling. That was the moment the family stopped seeking medical answers. And turned to the church. According to official correspondence, the initial request for intervention was denied. The symptoms, while unusual, did not meet the criteria for formal investigation. But one detail changed everything. The attending priest, Father Imran, reviewed the written accounts and agreed to visit the home personally. He arrived 3 days later. What he witnessed inside that house was never included in the official records. But his personal journal tells a very different story. And it begins with a single line. The child did not react to my presence. It recognized it. Father Imran did not announce his arrival with any formal ritual. He entered the home quietly, carrying only a small leather bag and a worn copy of scripture. According to his personal journal, he chose not to perform any blessings immediately. He wanted to observe. The house itself showed no outward signs of disturbance. No damage. No unnatural odors. Nothing that would suggest anything beyond an anxious family struggling with an unusual child. But the silence inside felt heavy. Not empty. Occupied. The parents led him to the child's room, without speaking much. Both of them appeared exhausted. Not physically, but mentally drained, as if they had not experienced a moment of peace in weeks. When the door opened, Father Imran paused. Ayan was lying in his crib, awake. Still. Watching the doorway. The priest stepped inside slowly. He did not approach immediately. Instead, he stood at a distance, observing the child carefully. Newborns react to new faces. They flinch, cry, or shift their attention unpredictably. Ion did none of that. His gaze locked onto the priest the moment he entered. And it did not break. Father Imran later wrote, "There was no curiosity in his eyes. No confusion. Only awareness. It was as if I had interrupted something, and it did not appreciate it." After several moments of silence, the priest moved closer. He reached into his bag and removed a small vial of holy water. Without speaking, he dipped his fingers into it and gently sprinkled a few drops toward the crib. The reaction was immediate. Ion's expression did not change, but the room did. The temperature dropped sharply. The parents noticed it at the same time, both stepping back instinctively. The child's body remained still, but the sound began again. That low humming, soft at first, then gradually louder. Father Imran did not stop. He began reciting a quiet prayer under his breath, his voice steady, controlled. The humming grew stronger, not chaotic, rhythmic, deliberate. And then, for a brief moment, the sound shifted. It became layered, as if more than one voice was producing it. The priest stopped speaking. The silence that followed felt unnatural, stretched too thin. And then Ion moved.
Slowly.
His head turned, not toward his parents, but toward the far corner of the room, his eyes fixed on something that was not there. Father Imran followed the direction of his gaze. There was nothing visible, but the priest later described a sensation in that moment, the distinct feeling of being observed from a place where nothing stood. Without warning, Ion began to laugh. A soft, controlled laugh. Not the spontaneous sound of an infant, but something measured, something intentional. The parents froze. Father Imran stepped closer to the crib, and that was when he spoke directly, not to the child, but to whatever might be within him. His voice remained calm, firm. He asked a single question. "Who are you?" The laughter stopped instantly. Ion's eyes shifted back to the priest. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence. Then the child's mouth opened, and a voice came out. Not loud, not distorted, but wrong. Too clear, too formed, for something so small. It spoke one word, a name. Father Imran did not write that name in full within his journal. He only recorded the first letter, and then crossed it out repeatedly, as if even writing it felt dangerous. What he did note, however, was his own reaction. The moment it spoke, I felt an immediate resistance. Not from the child, but from something deeper. Something that had no intention of leaving. The priest ended the session abruptly. He instructed the parents to leave the house for the night. They did not argue. They did not ask questions. They simply left. That same evening, Father Imran contacted the diocese and requested formal authorization for an exorcism. The request was initially delayed. Cases involving children, especially infants, required extensive verification. Medical evaluations had to be exhausted. Psychological assessments reviewed. But Father Imran insisted. He submitted his personal notes. He emphasized the direct response to holy water, the voice, the awareness. After 2 days of deliberation, the church granted conditional approval. The exorcism would take place under strict supervision. No external witnesses, minimal documentation, and complete confidentiality. The ritual was scheduled for the following night, at exactly 3 a.m. The time was not chosen randomly. It aligned with every recorded disturbance, every voice, every unexplained event. When the parents returned home with the priest and 2 assistants, the house felt different. Not quieter, but tense, as if something inside was waiting. They entered the child's room together. Ion was asleep, or, at least, his eyes were closed. The ritual began immediately. Father Imran placed protective markings around the crib. His assistants prepared the necessary items in silence. The air felt heavier with each passing second. The first prayer was spoken at 3:02 a.m. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Ion's eyes opened. Slowly, the humming returned, but this time it was louder, deeper, resonating in a way that seemed to vibrate through the walls. The priest continued. His voice rose slightly, more assertive now. The child's body remained still, but the crib began to tremble. Not violently, but steadily, as if something beneath it was pushing upward. The assistants exchanged glances, but did not intervene. The ritual intensified. Verses were repeated. Commands were issued. The room grew colder. The parents were instructed to stay outside. They did not see what happened next. But the priest's journal provides fragments. Broken entries. Written hours later. His handwriting uneven. Some words scratched out. Others underlined repeatedly. The voice multiplied. It spoke over itself. It knew the prayers before I spoke them. And then one line, written more clearly than the rest. At 3:17 a.m., it stopped pretending. According to the final account, that was the moment everything changed. The child sat upright again, but this time not slowly, instantly, as if pulled by something unseen. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, and when he spoke again, it was no longer just one voice. It was many, speaking together, in perfect synchronization. And what they said was not directed at the priest. It was directed at something else in the room, something that had not been there before. Father Imran described it as a presence, not visible, but undeniable, a second entity, drawn into the ritual, or perhaps summoned by it. The temperature dropped so rapidly that condensation formed along the walls. The air became difficult to breathe. The assistants later reported feeling pressure on their chests, as if something was forcing them backward. The priest continued the ritual, but his notes suggest hesitation. A rare break in composure. He wrote, "This is not possession in the traditional sense. This is occupation." The voices grew louder, faster, layered beyond comprehension. And then, suddenly, silence. Complete. Absolute silence. The kind that does not belong in a living space. The kind that feels final. Father Imran lowered his voice, spoke one final command, and for a moment it seemed to work. Ayon's body collapsed back into the crib. Still. Unmoving. The room warmed slightly. The pressure lifted. The assistants stepped forward cautiously. One of them checked the child's breathing. Normal. Steady. Everything appeared over. But Father Imran did not relax. He remained where he stood, staring at the crib, because something was wrong, not with the child, but with the room. He later wrote, "The presence did not leave. It only moved." No one else understood what he meant at the time, not until the following morning, when the parents entered the room again and found something inside the crib that had not been there before. Something small, blackened, resting beside the child. It looked like ash, but when the mother reached toward it, it shifted, as if it were breathing. The church sealed the case within restricted archives. No official conclusion was ever released. No final diagnosis. No confirmation of success or failure. But Father Imran's final journal entry remains preserved. A single sentence, written weeks later, after he refused to take any further cases. "We did not remove it. We only made room for something else."